Hi there, it's Denise Eckert, and I love coming on here and sharing different techniques and ideas to help you lower the stress and anxiety and overwhelm in your life. And today I've got Sabrina Trobak, and she lives in Fort St. John, BC, Canada. She's a registered counselor and the author of Not Good Enough, Understanding Your Core Belief and Anxiety. So Sabrina was a teacher, vice principal, and school counselor for 20 years, and she has extensive training involving past trauma and the impact trauma has on core beliefs like not good enough, not important, or not valued. So welcome, Sabrina.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Now, after being a counselor, teacher, and principal and all that, what inspired you to go down this road of helping people with their core beliefs?
I was teaching and then I was a school counselor, and I went to a workshop on suicide, and it was presented from the perspective of that core belief feeling not good enough, having unresolved trauma. At the end of the 3 day workshop, I just thought this is what I need to do. So I went back and forth with the presenter for about a year, and his name was Tony Martins. He decided to teach me his model of therapy. So I quit teaching and moved back to Fort St. John and started my own private practice based on this model, where we're really getting a better understanding of how that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, developed over the years, and what we need to do to challenge and change that core belief so I feel more good enough, important, and valued. Within about 6 months of my agency being up and running, which I started in 2010, I've had a waiting list. And I hate having to tell people, sorry, there's nothing I can do. So that's how the book came into fruition. I decided to write a book so I can at least provide a resource for people who can't access counseling for whatever reason.
And now, where do we get this not good enough, not important, or not valued?
I think it even starts before we're even born. It's passed down from our parents. So if my parents' core belief is not good enough, not important, not valued, how can they really teach me anything else? And so we see even the way they handle situations ends up feeding this thing in us where we feel not good enough. It's not one event, it's usually a combination of many events throughout our life. One of the big kind of common denominators is we are not taught how to feel our emotions. And so, with every experience we have, it creates emotion. And we're often just minimized or brushed aside, or it's not really that bad. Push that emotion back down. The emotion doesn't go away, it builds and builds and builds. And then it gets harder and harder to cope. So then my core belief, not good enough, becomes even more and more significant because I'm so busy just trying to cope with all the daily emotion that I've got already. Any little thing just becomes too overwhelming. So it ends up feeding off of each other as that emotion builds and builds. So part of what we need to get better at is being able to acknowledge what emotion I am feeling and get better at being able to feel the emotion. That's one of the best ways to really challenge that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, and start to develop the core belief, good enough, important, and valued.
Now, do you work with mostly men, women, or teens? What age group?
I mostly adults. The vast majority of my clients are adult. Right now, I'm almost 50-50 men and women. The counseling approach that I have is it's pretty blunt. I just call things for what they are. It's not a lot of sunshine and unicorn sort of thing. So men often really appreciate the approach that I have because it is more almost kind of science based. And so I have about a 50% men women ratio, which is pretty good for counseling for sure. Part of I think that success is the virtual. There's still that stigma attached to men going to counseling and getting help. It's getting better, but it's still there. When they really just have to log in from their truck and meet with me virtually, nobody even has to know. Whereas coming into my office space, when I had my own office space, that was a bit of a different approach. Men were much more intimidated to physically go into an office space. But since I've been virtual, it's about 50%.
That's awesome. Because, yeah, even the stigma in the media, it's if someone wants to go to couples counseling, it's like the men are like, no.
Yeah.
And just being able to talk about issues that you are having mentally or things that are blocking you or holding you back, it's so important in our world. It really is.
Absolutely. Men carry a lot of stuff. They have a lot of hurt, a lot of pressure, a lot of stress as well, and they have just as much right to sort through it as anyone else. We're all human.
Absolutely. And if they are sorting through their things, they make better fathers, partners, brothers, whatever, right? Now, for someone that's listening to this and they recognize that this is an issue for them, what are the first steps that they can take to start valuing themselves better?
I think one of the very first steps is really becoming more aware of how significant that core belief is. For a lot of people, when they start counseling with me and we talk about that core belief, they say, I never realized that's what it was, but you're speaking to the choir. Everything you're saying makes total sense. So we have to be more aware of how much does that core belief actually pop up throughout our day. We say that we're constantly trying to support our core belief. So if my core belief is not good enough, I am going to be drawn to people, places, experiences, my perceptions. They are all going to reinforce and support that core belief not good enough. So in order to make real change, I have to challenge and change at that core belief level. First of all, I have to become aware of how significant that core belief is.
And I was going to ask you, just sort of stepping back a little bit, yeah, how do we recognize that we have that core belief?
I think if you're listening to this podcast, it's probably resonating with you where you're going, oh, yeah, I feel that sometimes. And so then you just have to keep building on that. So when something happens and you feel angry, you feel anxious, you feel irritated, you feel overwhelmed, stop and ask yourself, is there a core belief being triggered here? Not good enough, not important, not valued. Could be one, two, or all three of them. That's how you can start to become more aware of how significant that core belief is. It's often suppressed by emotions like anger, irritability, anxiety. Those ones were a bit more okay to feel, but they're often there for a reason. They're trying to suppress other stuff.
Now, when it comes to our emotions, or when we are doing this type of work, do we replace our core beliefs with more positive ones? Is that what your recommendation is?
That's what kind of naturally happens. As I start to challenge that core belief not good enough, I start feeling good enough. And so there's a shift. It's not an on off switch where it's off and on. It takes time, it's a progression. And slowly we see that not good enough becoming less and less significant and feeling good enough becoming more and more significant. So now I'm not as stressed. I don't have as much anxiety. I'm not taking things as personally. I have more of a positive outlook on things. So we see those little shifts that all suggest that core belief is changing. If the core belief wasn't changing, we wouldn't see those changes happening.
Now, are there any other tools that you can use to make that switch?
For sure. The book goes through a lot of information on how to become more aware of that core belief, how to challenge it. It looks at it through anxiety, through anger, lots of different ways. One of the big things I think is anxiety. We see a ton of anxiety in our society. Anxiety is very much connected to that core belief. Anxiety is lack of confidence, not believing in myself I can handle something. So a lot of people look at anxiety as it's a trigger that happens. So I have anxiety of heights. If it was about heights, then every single person on the face of the earth would have anxiety of heights, but not everyone does. So it's not about heights. Anxiety is about my belief in my ability to handle something. If I believe I can handle heights, I'm not going to have anxiety. If I believe I cannot handle heights, I'm going to have more anxiety. So if my core belief is not good enough, there is a much higher chance that I'm not going to believe in myself as much, and therefore I'm going to have more anxiety. So if anxiety is lack of confidence, one of the key strategies we can use is make a plan. Because if I make a plan, I'm going to feel more confident in my ability to handle something. Let's say next week I'm going on a trip and I've got to fly and I have anxiety of flying. So I need to make a list of, okay, what are the fears that I have? What's the anxiety? I'm scared I'm going to miss my flight. I don't like all the crowds of people. Okay, so I take each one. Okay, missing my flight. What's a plan I can put in place so that's not going to happen? So I'd make a plan about how I'm going to arrive early. I'm going to make sure that I have all the security stuff. I got good flip-flop shoes on. I'm not wearing any metals. I've got my liquids properly stored. Going to go through and all do all that. So I make a plan of what I can do to increase the chances that I am going to make my flight. So now my anxiety goes down because I feel more confident in myself because I have a plan of what it looks like. But then we would also do a plan of, okay, so what if you miss your flight? It's not the end of the world. Sucks, but there's other things we can do. So then we make another plan. What if I miss my flight? Maybe I see if there's another flight I can make and another connection. Maybe I have to cancel my trip and I can't go. That would be hard. I wouldn't like it. It'd be disappointing, but I'd be okay. I've handled much worse than that. And so once we realize that we can handle these things that create these anxiety, that anxiety starts to go around. So creating a plan works for real scenarios, but it also works for the anxious thoughts. So we often run those what if scenarios. Anxious people who have a lot of anxiety often run those what if scenarios that 90% of the time, they're not even going to happen. Making a plan for that, we often just, oh, try not to think about it, but it doesn't go away. It just gets bigger and bigger. So if I take that anxious thought and I think, okay, what would I do? What's my plan if that actually happened? So my anxious thought is, what if there's a monster under my bed? Never gonna happen. But I still make a plan for it. What would I do if there was a monster in my bed? I would jump up, grab my phone, run out of the room, and call 911. I would toss my partner under the bed and run in the other direction. Whatever my plan is, it's not real, so I can be as silly as I want. I could say, I'm going to pull out my magic wand and poof, make it turn into a flower or something like that. I make a plan for how I would handle that worry thought. Now, the worry thought becomes less, and in a lot of cases, it even goes away because the worry thought is based on the idea that I don't know how to handle it. Once we get better at realizing how you would actually handle it, a lot of that anxiety goes away significantly.
And that's really important because it's almost what is the worst case scenario? And it's really not that bad. I'm the queen of missing flights.
Yeah, and see, you handled them all.
Yeah. And I'd still get there somehow. Once was
Yeah,
really bad because I missed the main flight. So I didn't get to meet the people on the flight. And then I had to get in and make sure that they didn't cancel my flight back and blah, blah, blah. What in the end, I made it. Yes, I
yeah,
was a day late, chill. But
yeah, we handle it. Exactly. Yeah.
and I like the planning idea because it's almost like you're doing a dress rehearsal.
Hmm.
So when something does come up, you are prepared and it's
Hmm.
not something new. You're not going to be, oh my, I don't know what to do. And it's funny because I did have someone that came on this show that was extremely prepared. And she told me she had anxiety about going on podcasts. And I just looked in the background because I'm one of these people that I just fly on and I do things spur of the moment. And she did. She signed on 10 minutes early. And it's just like bringing that anxiety down for herself. And I was very intrigued by what she was doing. So this is basically down the road of what you're teaching as well, right?
The more prepared you are, the more planned you are, the more confident you're going to feel in being able to handle it. Because if I have a plan and then things go sideways and I don't have a plan for it, at least I had a plan for some things, increases the chances that, okay, this went this way, but I can figure out a plan based on these other ideas that I have. It just makes that anxiety goes down significantly because we believe in ourselves more, we can handle it. The more we keep doing that, the more we continue to believe in ourselves, the more that core belief, good enough, important, and valued, continues to grow, the less anxiety we see.
Now, a lot of people say, don't look at the future, stay in present. And so this planning actually does the opposite, but you're putting yourself at ease, basically.
Right. I think there's a difference between worrying about the future and planning for the future. I think we need a bit of a combination of both. I need to appreciate and be present in the moment because when I'm present, I'm connecting with other people. I've got more awareness. My anxiety is going to be lower. So I need to be present and in the moment. But if I have something coming up that's creating anxiety for me, I need to make a plan on how I can deal with it. Doing that actually allows me to be more present in the moment now because I'm not worrying about this thing that's happening in the future. Because when it comes up, I go, yeah, I know how I'm going to handle that. I can be more present in the moment. So I think they almost work together.
Yeah. And what I love what you've said too is that you've done every scenario. So basically, if something does happen, it's, oh yeah, I can deal with that, no problem.
Exactly. Exactly.
Next.
Yeah. And that's what anxiety is like, worrying about all these things out here. Why do I worry about all these things out here? Because I don't believe in myself I can handle it. The
Yeah.
more I believe in myself, the less I have to worry about all these things out here because I don't, whatever comes up, I got it. I'll figure it out. I may not be graceful at it, but I'll figure it out. So now I don't have to worry about all those things. I just focus on me.
And you must see incredible results doing what you're doing then, because anxiety is so debilitating. And I've only experienced it a few times, and I'm so lucky, but I do have people in my life that experience it a lot. And for myself, it's okay. I experienced it a few times, and it's just such a horrible feeling. And with what you're doing and you're helping people lowering their anxiety with the planning and looking at and the awareness, it's just so amazing.
It is a big shift. In my counseling agency, what we do is we call it gathering information. That's where I sit and I listen to all of their life story. They tell me every detail about their life story that we can think of. As we're going through that, I'm trying to figure out how is that core belief developing with all of these experiences. And then we go back and sort through and work through these experiences. As we're doing, that core belief is shifting and changing. So I have people who come in who struggle with alcohol or smoking marijuana. And, 6, 7, 8 months into counseling, they say, yeah, I don't really feel like I need to drink anymore. I'm not really smoking as much marijuana or any marijuana. Because if I believe in myself more, if I'm getting better at feeling my emotion, I don't need those coping strategies to numb alcohol, marijuana, shopping, busyness, pornography, all those coping strategies, they're a distraction so that I can numb myself. I don't have to feel what I'm feeling. If I get better at feeling what I feel, I don't need those coping strategies anymore. So we don't even really focus a lot of time on the coping strategies. We work on that core belief and shifting it. As that core belief shifts, the behaviors, the beliefs, the perceptions just naturally fall in place to support that new growing core belief good enough, important, and valued.
And when someone comes to you and you're doing the initial consultation and you're looking for those markers, if that person has those core beliefs, what are those markers that you're looking for?
It can vary. Everyone's life experience is different. Even siblings have different life experiences. It's kind of learning what their own experience is, but it's often things where there is abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse. It's often neglect. Even growing up in a home where there's a lot of yelling and fighting, even if the yelling isn't towards the kids, but the parents are yelling and fighting, that has an impact. Separated families where it wasn't dealt with. Separation, I think a separated family is better than an unhealthy family that's together. What the issue is, we often don't really talk about it. What's happening? What's going on? What are the kids feeling through it? It just happens to them, and then we move on and pretend it didn't exist. So we're looking for all those kind of things. Was there any bullying at school? Did they struggle? Did they have a learning disability or attention deficit or any of those kind of things that made schooling more difficult or more of a challenge? Did they struggle more socially? All those kind of pieces. How disconnected was mom often busy doing all the volunteer work and dad was grumpy and irritable? All those things are slowly developing that core belief not good enough, not important, not valued. So we're looking for a variety of different experiences for sure.
That's amazing. And you're not only looking at that, you're looking at what your parents experienced as well. It's just
Exactly.
good.
They're doing what they're doing for a reason as well. That's right. And I think that's really important. The process that I go through is not about blaming your parents. It's about understanding they did the best they could with what they got, but they made some decisions that had an impact on you. Let's help you sort that and figure that out so you're not making the same choices for your children. You can do things different.
Absolutely. Now, can you talk about your book a little bit?
Sure. So the book it's written for people who have anxiety. So as a learning assistant teacher, I dealt with kids who had learning disabilities, often had a lot of anxiety. Generally, people with anxiety don't like to read. It's too distracting from them. They have to read the page over 4 times before they're actually able to focus on it because their brain is going in so many different directions. So the book is written in very small chunks. You can read a half a page and stop. There's lots of visuals, lots of charts, lots of diagrams that are good for people who have learning disabilities or anxiety, helps them focus, understand things a bit more. It's written in really small chunks. It's written at about a grade 6, 7, 8 reading level. So it's not like the science, psychology, terminologies, or any of that. I made it for the average person who just wants to get a better understanding of what's going on for them and why they're struggling. And so basically, you read a little bit of information and then you apply that information to the activities that are in the book using your own personal experiences.
Sounds amazing. So it is a little bit of a workbook and different practices that you can try.
Absolutely. Yeah. It goes through lots of different strategies. It helps you first, like, even get a better understanding of where your core belief is. Anxiety, your symptoms of anxiety. We often know what our anxiety looks like when it's really high, say a 10 out of 10, but we don't necessarily know what it's like when it's a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That means we're not doing anything about our anxiety until it's really high. So if I can start to realize what my anxiety looks like at a 3, I start chewing my lip or playing with my fingernails. I put strategies in place there, it doesn't have to escalate. So we look at a real broad spectrum of different symptoms of anxiety. We look at strategies that you can put in place to help you manage. What are your strategies when your anxiety is lower? How do those strategies increase as the anxiety increases? We look at anger. We say that anger is not a standalone emotion. We don't like to feel sad, vulnerable, lonely, rejection, abandoned. So we often switch it to anger. So it's looking at what does each reader's anger look like? What are the emotions that they're often avoiding and suppressing? Then we talk more about emotions and how emotions work. So it's got a real good layout of a variety of different activities that really help you get a good grounding on what's going on for you and how to better manage it.
Sounds amazing. Okay, we're going to be wrapping this up. So, Sabrina, what are your final words of wisdom to the audience today?
Just go slow. A little bit at a time is often much more manageable, much more sustainable. So just picking a little piece at a time, working on that and practicing that for a bunch of time, and then moving on to the next step. We often jump too big or we want to take baby step after baby step, but practice is the really important piece. So we need to take a baby step, practice for a good amount of time, then take the next baby step and practice again. When we're doing that, we're building that core belief, good enough, important, and valued. We're increasing awareness. We're becoming more confident in ourselves. We're going to be much more likely to succeed in moving forward rather than falling back to our old ways of doing things.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Amazing information, because you know what? A lot of us feel like that. And I know myself, I've
Yeah.
struggled with that as well. And it's nice to see some practical information that you can do rather than
Yeah.
reading about it. Now, wherever you're watching or listening to this, I'll have Sabrina's information on there, her social media handles, and her website information. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and ask Sabrina those questions. Thank you so much. Great information, and leaving you a gentle reminder to slow down and enjoy life. And I'll see you in the next episode.